So recently I passed the JLPT N1 test. JLPT is Japanese Language Proficiency Test, and N1 is the hardest level. And to get an idea of how hard it is, the estimated time that you need to study that people say is like anywhere from like 1,000 hours to 4,000 plus hours of study required to get to the level to pass the test. So it's pretty hard. And for me, I hadn't initially been studying to take the test. It was just like I learned Japanese because I thought it was a fun hobby. I thought it was something that was interesting, and there were a lot of things that I did for fun that were originally in Japanese, so it kind of made sense to learn it for that reason as well. But I kind of just did it as a hobby, and then eventually I got to the point where I felt like, okay, I'm actually really good at this now. I've learned a lot, and I want to be able to like prove that I have a certain level of knowledge. And because anyone can just say like, they've studied Japanese a lot and they're good at it, but what good is can mean anything from like I pick up a few phrases in anime to like I'm fluent. So there's a wide range in there. So if I tell other people, "Oh yeah, I'm good at Japanese," they don't have a good baseline for what that means. But if I if I'm able to like pass the N1 test, then I can say I'm at least this level of good. I'm actually like I'm better than just like knowing a couple of phrases here and there. I'm at least pretty good. So that's kind of why I wanted to take the test. And I'd been learning Japanese for a really long time. Again, I kind of just started because some of the things that I found interesting were originally in Japanese, and I had fun learning it. So, in order to learn it, I first started out just um, kind of like learning grammar online. So, there was this website called Tai Kim's Guide to Japanese Grammar, and that's where I learned most of the grammar. And grammar was something that I felt like I was pretty naturally good at, just because it's like very logical, so it really matches with how I think, I would say. So it's like a set of logical rules. You do this in this situation, you do this in this situation, and all of that. And Japanese grammar is like pretty consistent too. Where like with English, when you're changing tenses, a lot of words, there's a lot of like words that don't follow the pattern or that are different, and you don't change them all the same way. With Japanese, all of it is like pretty consistent, so that's nice. And then I guess before that probably, or maybe around that time, I had to memorize um, all the characters, so just the basic ones, and even that, all of it like takes time. It's not really that easy. Like it took a while to memorize all the hiragana and the katakana, and then just a lot of practice to get to the point where it was like you can read it faster, and it's not like, okay, what is this character? Oh, I remember. Oh, what is this character? Like you can't read sentences like that because it takes too long. So you have to just repeat it over and over until it's something that you can do naturally and do quickly. So I learned the characters, and I learned some words, and I did study in college, but I only took like a year, so 2 semesters of college classes, because then my school didn't offer the class anymore. So everything else I just did through self-study online. But if you're interested in learning, I think that that might be good to know that if you're dedicated and maybe pretty good at it, there's at least enough resources online that you could get good at the language just through self-study, just through online resources. So it's something that can be done. Again, it might depend on how good you are at naturally like learning this kind of stuff and picking it up, but it is doable. And there's a lot of stuff you can find online. So, so I did a lot of that. I did kanji a lot. So there's a period where I was really into learning kanji. So I'd write them all over and over, memorize how to write them. Then I would learn a bunch. And so I knew a bunch of kanji. And then eventually I stopped studying kanji. And I also stopped writing kanji. And I pretty much completely forgot how to write kanji at all. So it's like I'm very good at recognizing them. I'm N1 level, but uh, I don't really remember how to write them just because I haven't studied it in a very long time. So even the simple ones, it's like I don't necessarily remember the components that make them up. I don't necessarily remember like stroke order or even the pieces that make them, but if I see it, I know what it is. So as for some, I would say like I've heard of a debate in like should you study how to write kanji, and I would say I I'm on the side of I don't think it's necessary. If you want to, if you need to write kanji or you want to write kanji, you should study that. And if you feel like it helps you recognize kanji, then it might be worth it for you, but in general I don't think it's like something you have to do. But I can only talk about my own experience. I don't know about how it is for other people. Like, just understanding the idea, like being able to break up a kanji into different pieces and kind of understand what those pieces look like, what those pieces tend to be made of, that can be pretty helpful, I think. But beyond that, I don't know if really learning how to write every kanji is that useful. So I would think of it as it's useful to help you understand how kanji tend to be structured and the things you tend to see in kanji. But beyond that, I I'm of the opinion that you don't really need to learn how to write them. But so I did all of that, and then I took a trip to Japan, and it was like I knew I was like okay at the language, but I like when I was there, it was pretty tough. Like um, for the most part, I couldn't really understand things people were saying. I couldn't read that much. But, every now and then I could pick up words, I could understand things. And one thing that happened was that I got lost somewhere, and I was able to ask someone in Japanese like, how do I get to this place? And then they tried to respond in English, but their English wasn't very good, and I was able to say, "You can say it in Japanese." In Japanese, so then they answered in Japanese, and I could understand enough of what they said to get where I needed to go. So it was like, okay, I mean, I can use it. It's like it's not like I didn't learn anything. It's like I'm. It's I can do some stuff with it. I can understand some stuff with it. But at that time, like I hadn't done much listening practice, I would say, and I hadn't really done any speaking practice. So those things were really unnatural for me. And then it was just like, well, I learned a lot, but I don't feel like I'm that good at it. Like it's like I'm not. So at that time, maybe I was N3 level. I'm not sure. I didn't really look at. I went straight to N1. So I didn't really go through the other levels, but maybe I was like N3 level at that time, or N4 even. But it was like, well, I guess that's how good I am. But then eventually it was like, kind of recently, it was like, okay, we're gonna go again as a family trip to Japan. And I thought, with a few months to the trip, I was like, okay, I want to get back into studying Japanese seriously again and go really hard for it and see what I can do, see if I can be better at understanding when I'm actually there. And see if I can actually, do stuff with it. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go for it pretty seriously. And one of the things that really helped me personally is that, you know, I do coding. So way back when I first started learning, I also like learned how to code some stuff. So I coded my own like hiragana and katakana and kanji practice programs just for like learning, and that helped me learn a lot. And I'm pretty sure you can find similar things online that other people have made that are more official, but I had fun doing it myself. And then when I was like learning for the most recent trip, I made a word study program. And the thing that was really nice about it, like what I really like about making my own study program, is that I can like put in every feature that I want. So like if I want a feature to be in there, I can add it in, and I don't have to add in any features that I'm not going to use. So I made it where you could study like English to Japanese. So like it shows you the English definition and you type in the Japanese word, and then Japanese to English, of course, pronunciation to English. So that's kind of helpful for understanding spoken Japanese, because sometimes you can kind of like cheat or get an advantage by seeing the characters. So you may not really, the word may not jump out at you, but when you see the character like kanji are associated with meaning, so they can give you a hint to what the word means, and then that can help you remember what the word is. But if someone's speaking, you don't see the kanji, so you have to just know the word from the pronunciation. So that's why I added that in as a feature. I also did sentences, so like you could throw in example sentences, and then the program would remove the words you were studying from the sentences, and you have to fill it back in. So I did that for the N1 grammar. So like I would add in all the grammar phrases, and then add in example sentences, and then it would remove the grammar phrase from the sentence, and you have to say, okay, what grammar phrase goes into this sentence. So I thought it was really fun because, like I said, I could add in any feature I wanted to be in there, and I could just add it in. And then going through the process too, so I put in all the words and pronunciations and definitions manually. So, but by doing that, I feel like it helped me remember them better, because I kind of have an association with it, being like, oh yeah, I remember typing in this word, and I remember using this specific definition, because I didn't know how to like I didn't know how to concisely put the definition in, so I wrote this. But that kind of helps you remember. But going back to studying before the most recent trip, I studied pretty hard for like 3 or 4 months straight, and the main thing I did was to just read a bunch of random things online from all different kinds of topics, all different kinds of sources. I would do blogs, I would do travel guides, I would do newspapers, I would do people writing about, you know, experiences in America, experiences learning English. I always thought that was funny because, you know, I'm fluent in English. I'm a native English speaker, so it's kind of interesting to see, you know, people from the language I don't know talking about learning a language I'm fluent in. I just thought that was kind of fun. So then I read a whole bunch of stuff, and then every time I ran into a word I didn't know, I would add it into my study program and then review it later. And it was very tedious for a while because I would run into so many words that I didn't know. Like, a lot of sentences would just have multiple words that I don't know, and be like, okay, what is this word? and look it up. What is this word? Look it up. And so there's this thing called, if you don't know, there's this thing called Rikai Kun or Rikai Chan, where you can use it in a browser and then hover your mouse cursor over a word and it will automatically bring up the definition. So that's really convenient and really useful, really helpful when you're trying to do this type of studying. But I use that, and then, but even then, it's still really tedious when you have to like highlight a word and be like, okay, what's this one? Okay, let's type out the definition and the word. Okay, what's this one? Type out the definition and the word. But I feel like it was really beneficial. So the thing that I emphasized was that I tried to understand every sentence I read, like keep rereading the sentence until I understand it. And it's not as easy as it sounds, because sometimes I would run into situations where I understood every word in the sentence and I felt like I understood the meaning of all the words in the sentence and the grammar, but I still couldn't make sense of what the sentence was saying. So going through that process a lot of times really helped me to be able to process like Japanese sentences a lot quicker and a lot better than I could before. So then and eventually, like, the process got a little bit less tedious because, you know, I had learned so many words that it's like, okay, I remember that one, I remember that. And then, so there were a lot less words that I didn't know, but something that I kind of felt like was really surprising was that it felt like no matter how many words I learned, there were just always more words that I didn't know that would come up that weren't even necessarily that like uncommon or crazy. Like I didn't have to go way out of my way into fields that I've never studied before to find them. They would just come up and it's like, oh wait, I've never heard that word before. And you know, I remembered most of the words I reviewed, and then even the ones I didn't remember, I would almost always remember, okay, I've learned that word, but I don't remember what it means. So then I would still run into words that's like, well, I've never learned that word, I've never seen that word, but apparently it's not that uncommon. And it just keeps happening. It's like even now, it's like having learned so many words, I would feel like, okay, at this point, I should know most of the words, right? But it's like, no, there's another word that I don't know. There's no, and they just keep coming up. So that's something that kind of surprised me. But again, I learned so many words that's like, even though there's words I don't know, there's a lot that I do know, and I got better at processing sentences. So sometimes you can just kind of guess what the word you don't know is. Then I also listen to a lot of stuff. So I would go on YouTube and watch random videos for practice, and then I would do the same type of thing where I try to know every word. So if there was a word that I didn't know, I would pause and go back and say, okay, what is he saying? What is she saying? What is this person saying? What is the word? And then if there's a new word, I'd add it into my study program again. And then like I could feel some really good progress doing that, where it's like I in the past hadn't practiced listening as much, but it was like, okay, it's not so bad anymore. It's not so hard. Like I can understand a lot of the things being said without having to like slow down or review it. And then a lot of them, if I just go back and listen to it a second time, I'll understand even more. So I made a bunch of progress, and then I went to Japan on that trip with my family, and then I was pretty surprised when I was there because it was like the difference was very clear. Like I'd say I had been studying like, you know, years on and off uh, before that other trip that I was talking about, and even then it was like, well, I can't understand that much. Like I can understand a decent amount, but there's a lot that I just can't understand. But then the most recent trip, it was like I had only been studying for like 3 or 4 months. Again, it was very focused, like pretty intense. I put a lot of effort into it, but it wasn't that long of a time span. But all of a sudden, it was like I can understand so much. Like I hear an announcement made in a public place, and it's like I know what that said. And then it's not even just like I understand based on, the situation, the circumstantial clues. It's like, no, I actually understand the words that were said. I know those words and I know what was being said. And I had some funny experiences. Like one thing that I thought was really funny was that I went to an arcade and then there was a sign posted on a machine, just, straight in Japanese, and said something along the lines of like, if you want to play against other people in store matchmaking, then you have to make sure that you're on the same uh, machine type or machine label, like group label. So it's like group A and group B. You have to be on the same group. And at that time I was there at the arcade by myself, so then I was like, well, I can read it, but that doesn't apply to me. So so then I like sat down at a machine and was playing a game. And then I guess it was, it's obvious I'm not um, native Japanese, so two English speakers just saw me and they're like, "Hey, do you know how we can play against each other?" And then I was like, "What?" It was like, "Is this a test?" And I like looked at their machines, and one person was sitting on like a group A machine and the other person was sitting on a group B machine. And I was like, "Oh, you have to sit on machines that are the same group." And I was like, "Wow." That just seems like a crazy coincidence. It's like they're setting me up for a real life test. Like, did you actually understand what this sign said? And I'm like, yeah, I actually understood what that sign said. And then they're like, oh, okay, thanks. And then they played against each other. And I was like, wow, that just seems odd. I had other things where it's like, um, one time the coin got stuck in the machine, so I had to explain to the person, oh yeah, the coin got stuck in the machine, which I do, and then, handle that interaction. I wanted to buy like a certain card, so I asked someone like, where can I buy this card? And then they they answered in Japanese, and I had to understand that. But it was like, well, I've made so much progress. It's like I'm really good at this now. It's like I can actually do it now, and it just felt like in any situation I was in, like I could communicate what needed to be communicated, and I could understand most of what was said in response. And as long as I could like hear what was being said clearly, I could understand most of things that were being spoken. I was like, man, I've actually actually made progress. Like it worked. The studying that I did really paid off. So um, that was really cool. Like it was a really nice experience. And then then when I came back, then it was like, okay, now I feel like I'm actually pretty good. So then I thought, you know, the JLPT test is coming up pretty soon, so maybe I should take it just to like have something to show like, yeah, now I am this good. And then I was like, well, I want to take N2 probably, but if I feel like I can pass N1 without like having to commit to insane amounts of study to pass, to have a chance, then I'll go for N1. But I want to take the one that I feel pretty confident that I'm going to pass. And then just to see how it went, I went through a sample N1 test, and I took a past year exam. You can find some of them online. I took a past year exam of the N1 test, and then it was like, wow, it looks like I'm right on the borderline of passing probably. Like, I don't necessarily know. It didn't come with the grading rubric, so I don't know how the points are necessarily assigned, but it was like, I feel like I'm on the borderline of passing without having any specific test practice or specific test experience. That means if I have a few months left until the test, if I actually study for the test, I actually think I'll pass N1. So I might as well go for N1 then. So I was like, okay. So then I spent a few months just really focused on studying for the test specifically, like not just learning Japanese, but learning the actual test and studying just to pass the test. So I took a lot of past year exams and kept learning words, and then got really used to the format, came up with how I wanted to approach the test, what I thought was going to be tough, and what I needed to remember, what I needed to focus on. And then I was like, okay, I I mean, every time I was taking the past year exams, I was getting 75% average overall, and you only need 55%. You need 100 out of 180 to pass, but there's a little bit more because there's 3 sections, and you can't bomb one section really badly. You have to do about 30% at least on every section, and then 55% overall. Because you could do really good on 2 sections, and that would just make 55% by itself. But if you do really bad on one section, you wouldn't pass. But it's it's I guess it seems like an interesting standard for passing where it's only 55% or so, 100 out of 180. But it's it doesn't seem it seems like a pretty low percentage, but even then the test is actually pretty hard. It's not easy to pass. I would say you need the actual ability to pass, even though the bar seems pretty low. 100 out of 180 seems pretty low. It's hard. It's I understand why it's hard even with the bar seeming to be pretty low. And so that's most of my experiences with learning Japanese. But for other people, if you were interested in learning Japanese, I'd say you can find a lot of stuff online, and then I would just recommend study the thing that study for the purpose you want to use it for. If there's a specific thing you're interested in, then you should learn the vocabulary and practice that specific thing. If you want to be able to listen to stuff, you should practice listening a lot. And then I would recommend doing the thing that I did where it's you really try to understand everything you hear. Don't just listen to a bunch of things, listen to a few things, and then really try and understand that thing you listen to. Really try to get it, really try to make sense of everything. And don't just use context clues or just guess based on the situation. Really understand the words. And then it's of course easier it's easier to learn words around a specific topic. So if you have a specific thing, like for example, Puyo Puyo has a lot of information in Japanese. So like with Japanese, you can learn a lot of the terminology related to Puyo Puyo, and then like I was able to understand a lot of like Japanese commentary pretty well, even when my overall Japanese level wasn't that high. It was very good at for like understanding Puyo commentary just because I knew all the terminology related to it, and I had enough experience with that I could do that pretty well. So I would just say like practice the thing you want to be good at. So if you have a specific thing you want to be good at, practice that and learn things related to that. Now, it's hard in general because so like if you want to be able to understand the average person, like a random person in a random situation, that gets pretty hard because you can't control what words they use. So you can control, like, if you just want to learn simple words for everything and not learn the hard stuff, then you can stick to simple words and communicate to other people the things you want to communicate. But when other people are talking or communicating to you or just broadcasting information in general, for you can't control the words they use. So you can't like they're gonna use like just whatever words they feel like using, and some of those might seem obscure to you or they might seem complicated to you. But if you don't understand them, you're just not gonna understand what the person's saying a lot of times. So that can be really tough. So like that's why vocabulary is probably the major hurdle, just because there are so many words in the language that, like, for me at least, it feels like no matter how many words you learn, there's always more words that you just didn't know. And it's like, and again, some of them aren't even like that obscure or that complex. It's just like, well, I just never came across that word in my life. So I think vocabulary is the major hurdle, but it again, if you have an area you want to focus on, it's easier to learn the vocabulary related to that specific area or topic. But in general, if you just want to be able to understand random people, it's hard just because you don't know what kind of words they're going to use. But then for actually passing the N1 test, what I would recommend is, so obviously you have to be pretty good at the language. It's not an easy thing, and you have to know a good amount of grammar pretty well, so make sure you do that. But I would consider grammar to be like an easier thing, where it's like there's not as much grammar to learn. There's so many words in the language, but there's only a limited amount of grammar. And then the thing they call grammar, like grammar phrases and expressions, are things that I view more as they're kind of just like words at that point at the N1 level. What they call like grammar, you can kind of just think of as more words that you have to learn, and then so you need the basic grammar, and then that's not as hard. But I would really recommend just like, so you can probably find past exams online. So I would recommend taking a few of the past exams just to get used to the format and be familiar with what you're going to see on the test. And then once you're like familiar with the format, I would say you probably shouldn't focus too much on like practicing the grammar and the vocabulary section of the test, because it's like it's not that it's not that useful anymore. So I think I did that too much when preparing for the test. I practiced like past year grammar and vocabulary sections a lot. Like I did the whole test a lot, all three sections, but or however you want to call it, all two sections. I did the whole test a lot, but I don't think it's that useful to do the vocabulary sections a lot over and over. I think it's more useful to just read a lot. So like what I was doing, so just read a lot of random things and make sure you can understand everything you read and make sure you know all the words you see. So that I think just do that a lot. And that's what I'd recommend, like, so, and don't necessarily stick to a single area or a single topic, but try to read things that are like not overly simple, things that are at N1 level. So, people who kind of speak with bigger words, speak kind of academically, you know, try to read things like that and then try and understand everything. So if you do that a lot, then you'll just naturally build up the vocabulary. And the thing that I think is really nice when you practice like that is that you also have an association with the word you learned. So you have an experience with like seeing that word in a practical situation. So one of the things that I struggled with was that when I learned words from the grammar and vocabulary section of the test of like past year's exams, then the word like I didn't really have that much of a connection with the word or an understanding of like how the word is used in a sentence because all I learned was the word and the definition. And on the N1 test, there's a section where you have to answer like which sentence uses the word appropriately. And that's really hard to do. Like, you can't do it just from the definition because they specifically pick sentences where, like, if you only know the dictionary definition, the word could sound like it makes sense in every sentence. So you have to actually know the nuance and the specific, like, use case for that word. Like, how is this word actually used? But if you've seen the word used, like, by other people in sentences before, then most of the time you can just naturally pick it out. You're like, okay, I remember this word being used before, and it was used in a sentence like this. And then you can say, it's probably that one because when I saw the word used before in a sentence, then that was the that was the type of sentence it was used in. So by like learning words through things you read, that gives you an association with the word, that gives you like the example sentence. So that helps you understand more about the nuance of the word rather than just a dictionary definition. So I'm not for me, memorizing words was like something I was really good at. So I was impressed because I could like read stuff, make a list of like 100 words I didn't know and add them into my study program, and then run through that list of words once until I got all of them correct. And I would remember like 90% of the words. And I was like, I don't think this is normal, but I guess it's very useful. I was like, okay. And then I could keep doing it. Like I could do another 100 words and then remember 90%. And if I kept doing it, I would remember even more and remember them for a longer period of time. But I don't think everyone can do that. So if you can't do that, it's probably going to be harder for you. But just, I guess, take it at your own pace, do whatever you can do. I still think, again, learning from like just going through reading or speaking, just going through a lot of examples, doing a lot of input and hearing it and reading it, and then really understanding each sentence. Like, don't skim through anything, actually understand it. I think that's the most useful way to try and learn, or learn especially for the test, but even just in general, it's very useful. So, and then I guess one last thing is sometimes you can kind of guess what words mean based on the kanji that are used in them, but sometimes that can mislead you. So, so if you want to go really deep, like N1 level, or like where you really understand stuff, you have to actually make sure you understand, like check the definition of all the words and don't just rely on the kanji that are used in the word, because it's easy to be misled, where it's like the kanji make you think the word means a certain thing, but it actually has a slightly different meaning than the one you're thinking of, and it doesn't. So you're gonna get it wrong, or you're gonna like use it incorrectly, or take the wrong meaning from something because it's not quite, it doesn't quite match the kanji that are used in it in the way you think it would. That happens pretty often. So even if you can kind of guess the meaning of a word from the kanji, you should actually, like, if you want to be serious and go for a really high level of understanding, you should actually look up the word and make sure the definition matches what you think it is. But overall, I think that's about all I have to say on the topic. But I've had a lot of fun learning Japanese, and you know, one thing I did after I took the N1 test was, it was just like, just for fun, I would like watch random YouTube videos of people talking about anything, and then it's like, well, I can actually understand like 80-90% of what they're saying, and it's just kind of cool. So I would just like listen to random things and be like, yeah, I understand it, and this is kind of interesting, and it's just a cool experience. So I've had a lot of fun with it, and I feel like I made a lot of progress, and I'm happy with where I am. I'm not. I've been thinking about challenging like kanji kente, but I'm not sure if I want to commit to it or not. Like, I feel like with my memorization skills, I might be able to progress really quickly, but it's like it's going to be a very large time commitment if I want to go for that. So I don't know. And then beyond that, I don't know if I'm going to keep trying to get better. Like, again, there's always more words to learn, but I might just be like, well, I'm happy with where I am, and I can use my ability for like various things. I can translate videos. Like I made a player introduction video for the Japanese Pro League, introducing the international players. So it's like I'm at a level where I can use my skills for a lot of things, and I don't necessarily have to keep pushing to get better anymore. But so I don't know if I will or not.